Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahy. Today we're going to start off with a little bit of heartbreaking news out of Boulder, Colorado. Last week, it came out that Rashaan Salaam, the 1994 Heisman Trophy winner, was found dead at a park bench. Now, this is a little bit of a surprise because he was only 42 years old. And the immediate reports came out stating that he was expected to die. It was a suicide. And because that was the suspected cause of death, there was no foul play signs around him. The reports came out, and that was immediately changed. They dropped it. I don't know why. My only thought could be because it was going to be tied back to the concussion stuff that's been going on in the NFL. And so in 1994, he played for the Colorado Buffaloes in the NCAA. He won the Heisman. He beat out other 1994 standouts such as Steve McNair and Warren Sapp in the 90s. So these were great players that he was up against. And so he went out, won the Heisman, had an outstanding career at Colorado, was a great running back, went into the NFL. He had some injury issues, didn't really stick around too long. Now he faded out, and now in 2016, he's found dead, only 42 years old. It's very tough to talk about. And I tweeted some things out about this. It comes as a shock. You don't think that someone that young is going to be found in a park with no cause of death, no foul play. They're not really sure. I think they said they might have found the note, which is why suicide was the first report. But that kind of tapered off, and now I haven't heard any other news on it. I tried to look now to see before I podcast, because I podcast on Sundays, and they were released on Monday. So this report came out early last week, and I did tweet about it, had some responses. But my initial reaction is that it is tied to CTE, tied to concussions. They're going to find it if the family goes ahead and opens up for autopsies. It's a sad ordeal. I hope they do, because something has to change. He's not the first. He's probably not going to be the last that we're going to hear about. And this is something that needs to be addressed. I understand the game of football. It's a rough game, hard contact. I don't want to see it changed personally, but we can't have these guys not make it to even remotely close to the median age range for an adult male. They're dying way before they're supposed to. And some of them, I forget, was it Junior Seau? One of them went ahead and shot themselves in the chest because he knew something was wrong and he wanted to get studied. And he wanted his brain to be intact. And I'm pretty sure they found signs on him. So I'm hoping that they go ahead, they do an autopsy on Rashaan. I remember him growing up. He's one of the first college football players I remember. I remember the passion behind him and some of his teammates out at Colorado. I remember the Cordell Stewart, the Hail Mary he threw against Michigan. Around the same time, I don't know if Rashaan was on that team, but great Colorado teams in the early 90s. I know growing up in Pittsburgh or outside of Pittsburgh, Cordell Stewart, he was a big mainstay, so we always had his highlights going on the Steeler games as he was billed as Slash, the first triple threat quarterback in the NFL. And I always just connected the two. Rashaan, I know he didn't have a great NFL career, but it's very sad news. And for someone who grew up using these guys as role models, it's shocking, because that's what's going to happen in a few years if something doesn't change. You're going to have more kids growing up and seeing their role models pass around or pass away at an early age. And it's a tough topic to talk about, but something has to change. And I know the NFL, they're fighting their own concussion lawsuits. They don't believe that it's tied to the trauma in the NFL, the play, the hard hitting, the bigger, the faster athletes. But there's going to be some correlation. They don't want the studies released. I don't know what's going to happen. The only hope that I have is that these players now that are turning out to basically be sacrificial lambs for further testing, they're gone, and they had minor technology back in the day. They wore bulky helmets. I know when I started playing football in middle school, we had huge monstrosities as helmets. You could barely hold them up. They didn't offer very good support. And by the time I was in high school, the helmets did change. They do have computer technology now that they can put in helmets. So maybe these changes are already in place, but something needs to be done for the families and even other surviving ex-athletes, because they're making billions of dollars. They should not have their former players out there trying to do anything to get rid of the pain and torment and end the hurt that they're going through. And I know it's a somber note to start the podcast on, but I had to get that off my chest. It's been weighing on me. I hate to see more people that I grew up idolizing, grew up watching, wanted to be like them, would go out practice in the front yard, running, throwing, catching, trying to get better at sports, just to see them pass away at such a young age. It's just heartbreaking. So I'm hoping something gets done. I don't know what can be done, but we'll go ahead and start there. And along with that, on a more cheerful note, today's the first episode where I finally get a guest on. I think I finished some of the tech stuff on the tech side, where I'm trying to get everything lined up. I'm still behind a good bit on the website. My idea is to have everything in place completely by the start of the new year, starting to push some of this out. I've been working on getting my own technology up and running so that I can bring on guests, talk about different topics, and kind of bring more of a wider range audience into the fold as I try to do more things with the podcast itself, more things with the website. So I'm bringing more people into the fold, trying to get different perspectives on here so it's not only me talking all the time. I know that can be boring. I try to do my best talking about some of the subjects. I know, like, tragedies are hard. Trying not to keep it focused on sports either. I want to do a lot of the technology things. So we'll go ahead and start there. With the Christmas season right around the corner, I know I had talked about different technology being released for the holiday and how I haven't seen any. I've went ahead and I've started to get together pieces for Raspberry Pi 3. I had the Raspberry Pi 2. It worked well as a mini computer. And if you're not sure what the Raspberry Pi is, it's a mini motherboard computer that has various inputs. So the version I had before had a processor built in on the motherboard. It also had built-in support for USB drives, and it had, I think it was a USB power supply, and then it had an HDMI out. So you could plug it into your TV and use it sort of a stream box. You could put music on it, kind of like a TV music player. And if you had an HDMI output on your or input on your television, it would connect right to your television or another monitor you had. You could have it, like if you wanted to set up your own music player, you could go ahead. I think it had a SD card or a micro SD card. You put the SD card in with all your music files. Go ahead, boot into it. They had what's called a noob operating system, which was if you didn't really know what you were doing, you'd burn it onto the card itself. It would boot up into its own operating system, Linux-based. I believe it was Debian. And Debian has a lot of the same packages and software programs you would find on Windows or variations, so it's a very productive operating system. So you can get it set up to run like, for example, if you wanted a cheap music box, you wire some speakers through your house, have it all connecting. You don't want a main computer sitting there. You could buy a Raspberry Pi, get a nice little case for it, have it mounted on the wall. They now have a touch screen that you can get a case for, which is what I'm planning on getting as my setup. But you get the case, put the motherboard into it, it connects to the touch screen, and then you can go ahead, and then once you have it set up, you just put the music player right on the front, click on it, and then you can drag through and play music from it. And if you have it wired into, because it's just like any other computer, it's just smaller, more portable, and more flexible than having a huge monstrosity of a tower or getting a laptop that has a screen that's big tied to it. Because you most likely don't want to mount a full tablet on your wall because of the battery capability, and everything will run out of it. And you don't want to have to keep charging it. So this is something small. I want to test to see if I can get good battery life out of a portable battery pack. I believe that I can, but I'm not 100% sure. So it's something I'm going to have to go back to and see. But that's what I'm going to be testing on from the tech side. I don't really have any other things I'm going to dig into. I looked at some 4K televisions. I've also looked at some different digital cameras as I do some photography. Right now I have a Fuji X-T1. I've been looking at doing like some videos from it. I have enough that I can do 1080p, I think, built into it. The focus isn't the best though, so it's good if I'm doing like interviews. I can have it set up. But what I've actually been doing with it is Google had their new Google Photos app. It's not Google Photos. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it takes images that you take in burst, and it makes little videos out of them. I think Instagram does the same thing, kind of like a Snapchat or like a, what's the other one? Vine, that kind of went away. You could do like these short 5-second videos, but it goes ahead and makes them into GIFs. So I've been or GIFs. I don't know what people call them. I call them GIFs. But if you have a short video, then you're making these short little videos, and they had an app that you could message back and forth. I think mostly everything supports GIFs now, though. But I've been looking at that, seeing if I could do like some high quality one. I believe GIF only has a certain limitation for colors and bit mapping to keep the file size down because it was made for the internet and it's quite outdated. So I think Google's trying to update that to make more of an interactive video, kind of like a moving hello. I want to say Apple might do it now, but I've been looking at doing some manual ones. I think that's a cool little aspect. And the camera itself, if you're using full images and you're using a full video editing program, you can go ahead and make videos that are going to be 4K compatible. And I think that's really cool. So you go ahead, have your video ready to go. Right now, if your program or your computer only supports 1080p, save your project file, export it at 1080p. Next thing you know, as the hardware and these computers get better, you already have the image files ready to go to do a 4K. Little short, kind of like a stop motion video. It reminds me of, I was going through some of my old family videos, and they had, is it 16 millimeter? The old click cameras. So we actually have family videos where it's kind of like a stop motion-y. I guess it recorded the video directly onto film, and I had to get someone to convert it, which is quite expensive. So it's kind of a cheap, if you wanted to do your own videos and you didn't want to have to deal with the actual processing power of having a computer, having an expensive camera set up, you can always do little short bursts on your camera, make family videos that way. I'm going to experiment with that, so I'll probably be digging into that in a later episode. And because I know going back and forth, it seems like unless you want to invest a lot of money, you either have to go video or you have to go photography. So you have one or two routes. I know there are some cameras that take good quality photos, but are mainly geared for video. And then vice versa. I have a camera that's more for photography, even though it takes what could be great quality video. But if you're going to go ahead, I'm going to try to take advantage of some of the more messaging apps, because you see it a lot. It took off with Vine, a lot of the short image videos. And then with text messaging, it seemed to have gone back to having just short little videos, kind of like the early invent of the internet, where you're trading either videos or you want photography because you can look at it at a glance. So these are cool little keepsakes. I'm going to be messing around. I might put some on the website. I thought about doing like full-length videos, maybe trying to do a music video style in them. I know one of the Megadeth videos back in the 90s, Dave had like certain like war images flash through, so I thought that would be cool. But I've been looking at doing little things like that because I know computers and computer programs and software, it's tough to go ahead and buy software or buy programs without knowing or having any hands-on experience. And I'm not a fan of the buy a subscription that seems to be out there. So right now you have Adobe, who has the Photoshop suite. They also have Lightroom, and they have their own video maker. Their whole thing is subscription based. You pay $10 a month just for Photoshop. If you want to go ahead and get into video, then you have to pay even more to get into a video editing software. To go ahead, I think it's like $50 a month to use Adobe software. Microsoft started this same thing whenever they're trying to get you to use Microsoft Office. So they want you to pay $10 a month, and they try to entice you by saying you get a terabyte of cloud storage. But at that price, I mean, you're still paying a subscription based. I want to say Amazon, they had their cloud drive. It's not as robust as OneDrive, but they have their own cloud drive that's $50 or $60 a year, and it's unlimited storage. So if you have to pay $10 a month from Microsoft, that's getting up there to $100 a year. I think they do offer $100 a year price. And that seems to be the way technology is going. So I'm digging into some of that stuff, see what's out there, trying to get some more hands-on tech, see what you can do it yourself, do it at home, do it for cheap. No need to spend a ton of money on different things like that. And tying into that, going into the PlayStation games, PlayStation Plus came out this past week with their next round of free games. Actually, the PlayStation 3 had 2 free games too that were PlayStation Network games. So if you have a PlayStation 3, go ahead, download, I think it was Tiny Troops and Hyper Void. Download those games, even if you don't want to play them on the PS3, because they save to your cloud storage, and then you have access to the same version of the game on the PlayStation 4. So I highly recommend going out, downloading those. If you pay for the online service, you might as well download the free games. They're pretty cool. I started to play through Hyper Void. I actually spent most of my time this past week playing Badland, which was an older free version that I did the same thing with. It was a free version game on the PlayStation 3, PlayStation Plus monthly plan, available on the PlayStation Network. I went ahead, downloaded it on the PlayStation 3, deleted it, re-downloaded it on the PlayStation 4. And they had quite a few that you've been able to do this with in the past. So if you have both systems, you might as well take advantage of it. Because instead of getting only 2 free games like I've been talking about every month, you now get 4. So I had 4 free games this month. I don't remember the PlayStation 4 ones because the game I've been playing on the PlayStation 4 has been Badland. Badland's been pretty good. If you have a chance to pick it up, I recommend it. The levels are set up like Angry Birds, and what I mean by that is they have your little black tar thing. I don't even know what it is, but it's like a little creature that flies, and it's kind of like a mix between Flappy Bird. Maybe that's the game I'm thinking of more so than Angry Birds, because the level moves, you have to keep flapping your little guy through this level, avoiding things, getting power-ups, trying to hit your little buddies. I don't know what they're called, but I call them buddies. Trying to pick up your buddies so you save their lives too. And then you go through the whole game and level based. So it's like 40 levels. You can get eggs on them. I think they're missions, or they have little stars. So you go through, try to collect them, do as much as you can, and then there are other sets. So I think the PlayStation 1 gave me the complete game. Complete every bonus downloadable add-on came with my game. So that's pretty cool. So it's set up into 2 days. Day 1 has 40 little missions. Set up like Angry Birds, like I said. So you get in there, it shows you 10. You go to the right, there's like a different backdrop. And then you just flap through these levels. pretty cool. It seems like it could work on a mobile device. I don't know if I'd play it on a mobile device. I like having the option of playing it on PlayStation. You get the good quality graphics and everything. I'm not a graphics whore either. But you have good graphics. You get to use the controller, which is a plus to me because you can go back and forth. A little bit better controls. I know the keyboard and mouse. With the mouse, you get even greater detail. But for the controller for this game, works great. So I like the fact that you have a couple different options, I think, on controls, on how you want to flap. I think R2 trigger gives you some. I use X, I believe, to flap up and down. You can use the analog and I think the D-pad too. So you're not limited to just one control type. I haven't tried anything on the PlayStation 4 Touch analog thing. I never use that for any games. I think that's how you share, or maybe some people type on it for the keyboard, but I never really typed anyone. So that's what I've been looking at, getting that running, and just playing that game. So it's been pretty cool. I would recommend checking it out. I haven't beaten it completely yet. I beat the first day, and I've just been flying through trying to beat all the levels, giving a complete rundown on the game. Then I'll probably check out the hard mode. I'll do the same thing with Hyper Void. I don't know how many hours it will take me to beat the game, but I do enjoy playing them. They are free games, so you can't beat that, and there's nothing else to complain about. But those are the free games for the month. Pretty cool things to check out, and I recommend getting them. Next thing, I did see that they started to roll out some Nintendo Switch full-on versions of games and things, so it's been pretty cool to see that. Not too keen on any details, though. I know they were trying to push out a lot of the Mario Run for the iOS. They were saying that you could build your own levels. There's some different things. I think it's a $10 game to play Mario. Pretty cool. I haven't checked it out, though. And it makes me wonder, I think the 3DS that I got, I think there's a game that is called Super Mario Maker, which is sort of the same thing. You build levels, build your own Mario levels, and then try to beat them or have other people beat them, which is a cool idea. They did the same thing on the new Doom. So if you have the new Doom, there's a creator mode where you can go through, create levels. They have spawns you create where monsters show up, and it kind of gives you an extension on the game. So if you're tired of playing the story mode, nobody's on multiplayer, you can go in and build block levels, which are pretty cool. So I do like doing that. I do like the idea. It gives you the feel of a never dying game. I know Doom had a ton of mods for the PC. Even the Mac had some where you could still play with friends if you had certain things set up on your computer. And I've done that pretty recently as well. But I don't know how much. I haven't even checked in on the Doom. But I don't know how much people are going to be spending time building Mario levels. I wonder how many are manufactured or sent out to early adopters. Like, hey, if you go ahead and build some levels for us, we'll give you a free version of the game. So like, here's you got a month or a week. You can go in and build some levels, and then we'll review them, give you a code, then download the game for free full time. Something similar. I would imagine they have some type of exchange like that, where they want people to play the game, and they can go ahead and do the extra stuff just to get more people, more hype on the game itself. But I'll probably try to check it out. I don't know if they have a demo mode yet or any game, but I'll look at that. I think Nintendo still needs to go all out with their virtual console store. If this is their test into iOS, great. Get the game on there, but kind of bridge everything together. Because some Nintendo games I consider great misses. Like you have Mario Party. To me, that was an awful, bland. It wasn't even really a game. It was a mix between a board game with some awful, crappy controls. And I know some people probably think that I'm crazy. I know critics usually loved it, but I never understood it. I would much rather spend my time with friends playing GoldenEye on the 64, or playing Smash Brothers or Mario Kart, a game that's actually challenging than playing some pseudo board game. It doesn't make any sense to me. So there you go. I'm hoping Nintendo goes that way. They let you play the games. that you want to play, and they give you full versions, not these dumbed down versions. I know they had problems licensing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. He's no longer in the game if you buy the Virtual Console version or even the new Retro Nintendo version. I think they had problems with Tecmo Super Bowl, so they try to hype it up that Tecmo Bowl was the greatest, but Tecmo Bowl only had 4 plays. So you didn't have a lot of the customizability or whatever that you have with Tecmo Super Bowl. And you don't have all of the teams to choose from, so you're limited. And I know people hack Tecmo Super Bowl. If you want to check it out, go out, search Tecmo Super Bowl 2017. There are versions out there with all the teams built into the ROM, all the new players, and you can play this season on Tecmo Super Bowl. A lot of people don't know that. I recommend checking it out. Up to a point, every year I was getting that instead of Madden. I'll probably go back and rail on Madden. I might even do a test. I played Madden last year, and it's not really a game simulator anymore. It's not built for football. I want to play a custom Madden league online, not with 30 people. That gets crazy. I want to play a custom Madden league with only like 8, 10 people. So let me pick the teams. Let us do a fantasy draft. And then let us go ahead and play the season. At the end of the season, if you don't want more players in there, let us do another fantasy draft. Or even if you're worried about the licensing, just put the game engine out there online. Let people make up their own teams. Let them make up random people and still do a draft and play. Because people just want to play football against other people. I mean, I don't know what they're trying to do with these cards. They think people want to buy multiple versions of the game so that they can go ahead and say that they own all these NFL players. That doesn't make sense at all. I don't understand what their strategy is. And I actually have an old version of NHL. I think it's like 2014. I've kind of moved away from EA Games, EA Sports, because they don't understand what the fan base wants. And I mean, I guess it's an investment. They already invested in the engine. And then ESPN had their own football game. And they had an engine for that, but that kind of went the wayside whenever ESPN pressed and got the official rights to the NFL Players Association. But I think that they need to have a game like that you can play online against other people, and I think it would explode, especially if you had custom leagues. So, like, let's say if you had 20 people or $20 for the game. And then you had to set up for like 16 players max. And then each league you had to pay like $100 or so a year. So like a full year from like in August to August of next year, or even July 1 to July 1. Each year you had to pay like $100 to play this game, and when you paid, you got to download the updated version. People would buy that, I think, before they buy Madden. And I don't know. I'll probably go ahead and spin that out later. Probably talk about it more in detail. But right now I think that that's what the video game thing, they need to get together and realize what the consumer wants. They don't want these games where it's all about collecting and getting cards and getting coins. And I know that tangent probably didn't make sense, spinning off Mario into like random sports things. But with the Mario, they're already having it built. I think it's $9.99. I don't know for sure because I think in the store it says in-app purchases, which might mean that you buy it, it's $9, and then you get the full game. Or is it $9 to download and then plus in-app purchases, where if you're going to do Mario Builder, you also have to pay $1 for maybe those little mushroom dudes, maybe $1 for the ones that have the helmets on, maybe an extra $1, and then you're getting nickel and dimed as they try to make microtransactions to build up their own revenue of the game. And to me, it seems like everyone's trying to do that. And it doesn't make sense because you're just pushing people away. They want to know why Madden sales are down? That's why. And that's why I kind of went off on the tangent, because that's what it makes me think of. Madden used to be a game that you would play each year. You get to play with the team players. I never played with the regular rosters because some teams are awful. They're garbage. I would take a fantasy draft each year and start my dynasty. Have maybe my brother play with me. We'd have our own dynasty. Maybe some friends you play a few games a year. We did the same thing with baseball. I actually played 162 games of baseball once with a friend on Nintendo. I think it was like Ken Griffey Jr. baseball, maybe Ken Griffey Jr. Slugfest. But we played because we liked the game. We liked baseball. So we would play baseball, and it took us months to play 162 cartoon games of baseball. Yeah, we hung out quite a lot. But I remember beating like the whole thing, getting to the World Series. I think we actually took turns. It might have been one player, but we played the games. Like, we weren't playing the game to collect every single person. But I know that that's how some people think. They want to go ahead and they play the game because they want to collect all of the NFL player cards or whatever EA Sports switched to. I don't understand that, but I'm probably going to dig into that using EA Sports Hockey, NHL 2000. I think it's 2014. I own one of them, but I never really got into it because I couldn't find people to play online, and not too many people know how to play hockey, and I wasn't even that good at it. I was going from PES soccer to it, and just looking for like a sports game that I could play, something that I could be good at to kill the time, play online every once in a while. I got the one Madden. Was it 2016 Madden? Yeah, I think they're a year behind. It's kind of confusing. I think it goes by a Super Bowl year. So last year's Madden, I got that, played online. They kicked me off from the server. People accused me of cheating. All the classic things that happen in Madden. But if you're playing a game of Madden online against another person, that doesn't happen because you know the person. They're not going to report you to EA if you're running the score up. Even if I wasn't even running the score up, I was just controlling the ball and running the clock out. Because I like ball control offense. I run the ball, let the play clock go down as I do some shifts, have a couple passes, do deep dink downs, like a West Coast style offense. That's what I run on Madden. It's successful. Have a lot of crossing patterns. You're not trying to go deep all the time. And then you win, and then the other guy can't do anything, so they get frustrated. So they report you as cheating because they don't understand how football works. But I digress. That's it for the tech. I guess I went way off on tech and gaming on some tangents this week. I have been bringing some people on, and we talked a little bit of college football, previewed the Heisman, even though it came out and Lamar Jackson won on Saturday. I don't think it was a surprise. It ended up being a surprise that they invited 5 people. I mean, it looks good, especially for like Michigan and Oklahoma. Oklahoma had 2 people. Michigan gets a defensive guy in once again. So that looks good for them. And the other 2, though, had most of the votes. Thousands going to Deshaun Watson, who's, I think, is, if you're looking at the stats, that's not a Heisman winner. That's a solid game managing quarterback on a good team. But they're not even undefeated. And he didn't have good stats. I want to say Jake Browning had better stats than him. I'd have to look him up and do a side-by-side comparison, but I'm pretty sure he did too. He should definitely have been too, if not in the contention for Heisman over Deshaun Watson. But Lamar won it. He had him. If his team had a better record, I think you would have had it locked up. But some people had doubts going into the last weekend after the way his team crumbled at the end. I don't even think they made a BCS type game or whatever they call them these days, the New Year 6. Even though the Orange Bowl starts on the 30th. So it's not even on New Year's. But that's what we talked about. I set up with Matt. We did our interview over the phone. First guest. He is a football coach at high school. So he knows his football stuff. He's a Florida State fan. So I put him on. We talked a little bit about football. Had a problem with the connection. So what I tried to do was I was going to use Skype or FaceTime. We ended up using FaceTime on the phone directly into the soundboard. But it turns out that the cable I used was definitely my error. I had a cable that had a mic input. And so that mic out input picked up the room. So there was an extra input in between that kind of cut out and phased out some of the other connection. And so there's some hiss, some pop on it. I apologize for that. It's my error. It's the first interview. I'm throwing it at the end because of the way it turned out. So hopefully you stuck around. You can listen to the interview. I might put it up separate. I'm not 100% sure because it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted. I'll probably start to tweet more about getting more people on. If you want a guest, if you want some feedback, I might set up a voicemail that I can play certain clips and then talk about them during the podcast. I'm going to look into that. So feel free to contact me if you want to come on, talk about whatever you want to rant about. Go ahead, get some of your thoughts out there. I'll be getting more people on in the mix with a few others. We'll see what happens. Slow podcast week, I know. Fantasy football playoffs have been turning down. I have quite a run. I might make it to the championship game again. It depends on this Dallas-New York game. I think my opponent has a couple Cowboys. So as long as the Cowboys don't score 3 or 4 touchdowns by the guys I'm playing, I should be in the championship game next weekend. We finish ours early because the last 2 weeks of the NFL season, players start resting their players, or teams start resting their players, I guess. And it's not really fair. It's not really fun to have one of your starting guys rest because you know that they only rest players who are good and contribute to the team. The New York Giants accused the Pittsburgh Steelers of deflating footballs. And if you've been anywhere around the NFL the past few years, you know that Tom Brady was accused of deflating footballs. And my, oh my, has the narrative changed. Everyone in the media was out to lynch Tom Brady, even though it's basic science. And anyone, I'll even just go ahead, take any ball, basketball, football, that's inflatable, blow it up in the winter inside your house, take it out, put it in the trunk of your car, and in a few days go outside and see if it's still full. It won't be. Because what happens is the air compresses inside the ball. It's basic science. I don't understand why the NFL... So the NFL goes ahead. They have a vendetta against Tom Brady. They say, hey, the balls were deflated in this game. That's in Foxborough, New England, in the middle of the winter. Of course the balls are going to deflate. So they go ahead. They throw their vendetta at him. Say, no, that's not how science works. We're not going to listen to the science. Like a bunch of idiots. They go ahead, they suspend Tom Brady. There are scientists saying that it doesn't happen. I'm telling you, go ahead, take a ball, put it in the trunk of your car in the winter after filling it up inside your house, and it will go flat. I have to deal with it all the time. I carry a basketball in the back of my trunk. You know what else I carry? A pump. So I know that happens. You can't tell me that the ball boy is going to be in the locker room, walk outside where the balls are, and then they're going to say, hey, these balls feel flat. Well, you know who else should have reported that? The ref. There's a ref that touches every single ball. Watch a game of football. He touches it every single play. He'll stand there. He's the one that puts it down on the field, blows the whistle so the center can touch it. So you're telling me that guy who's paid by the NFL can't notice a deflated ball? It doesn't make any sense. So now the Giants are throwing it down, and what happens? The media does a complete 180. Now they're saying, oh, this again? Oh, we shouldn't bring this up. It's the Steelers, America's team. Well, maybe the Cowboys, but whatever. One of the most popular teams, they're not going to deflate balls. You know what? Did you watch their game today against the Bills? It was completely snowy out. Snow everywhere. So if they take a ball from today's game and try to say, are the Steelers deflating balls? I guarantee they can say that their balls are deflated a bit. I guarantee they find some evidence if they want to punish the Steelers for some reason. Because they're not listening to the facts. It doesn't make sense. And if they're going to start throwing these crazy cases against the wall, what are they going to say to the Steelers? Like, hey, you know what? They can't side with science now. They basically have to punish them because they punished Tom Brady. Or they don't punish the Steelers, say, hey, that just happens in the cold, and then Tom Brady fights back, wins his case. He's not going to get the 4 games back. It's pretty clear what they were doing. They were trying to keep Peyton Manning ahead of him in the most games won, which I'm pretty sure Tom Brady already passed him. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even matter anymore. They should just let Tom Brady play, Shouldn't be a deal. But for some reason, it's coming back. It's driving me crazy. Whatever. That's it for the week. I'm going to go ahead. Here's my interview with Matt. First of hopefully many. If you want to give me feedback, talk about anything, go ahead, throw it on. Boom. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the interview. You've been listening to Socially Numb with Richie Leahy. All right, so the college football playoffs were announced yesterday. The seeding ended up to be Alabama number 1, Clemson number 2, Ohio State number 3, and Washington number 4. Do you agree with their seeding and their selection?
I think they got it right. I mean, there's always going to be people who are going to complain about Penn State winning the Big Ten but not getting in. But I think at some point you have to start figuring out what the criteria is that you're looking for. Do you want people to play a tougher non-conference schedule, or do you want to value the conference championships themselves?
Yeah, and looking at that, what do you think from the Big 12 perspective, how they feel right now? Because they were jumped in the first playoff because they were told that they didn't play a hard enough non-conference schedule and they didn't have a conference championship game. And then they put the rules in place that that's going to be a thing next year, I believe. And then they watch a team without a conference championship make it this year.
Well, in years past, it was always, you can lose, but you would have to lose that game early in the year. I think they tried to take some of that out for the games like an Alabama LSU, where if those could possibly be two of the top teams in the country, if they're not being penalized playing that conference game late in the year and having one of them fall completely out. So I think in that aspect, it helps. But when you have a team like Oklahoma who got destroyed, who was the team that they got pasted by?
Ohio State.
Yeah, when they played Ohio State, it wasn't like it was a close game like the Michigan-Ohio State game was. I mean, they got decisively throttled. So I think that really hurt them. You know, just like with the Florida State-Louisville game. After Louisville pounded Florida State, I mean, there was no chance that you could recover from that. How do you justify being one of the top teams losing to that extent?
Well, speaking of that, since you're a Florida State guy, what do you think of Florida State getting that Orange Bowl bid over Louisville?
I tell you, to be honest with you, I'm okay with it. When you look at the strength of schedules and you compare both of them, who did they play on the non-conference slate? Florida State had arguably one of the toughest schedules this year, and not just because I'm a homer, but they played Ole Miss earlier in the season before injuries. They played Louisville. They're non-conference with Florida. I mean, I think they're a better representation of the conference than Louisville at this point. Because I think some of those late season losses to people that you shouldn't lose to come back to bite you in those cases.
Like Kentucky.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Kentucky that's barely competitive in their own conference.
Well, now you know that with them being in the ACC, that Kentucky game is going to be lumped into one of those end-of-year ACC, SEC primetime matchups. Year in and year out. They're going to try to push that.
Right, and I'm okay with scheduling, and especially it's a Power 5 matchup. You know, it's not like where like the Houston game, where Houston knocks off Louisville, but then later in the year loses to Navy. You know, it comes back to bite you, where that strength of schedule should play to some extent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Houston game is also what hurt Oklahoma, because if you look at it, that was the game to a non-Power 5 conference that you can't lose that game and expect to be in the playoffs. Now, if their only loss was that throttling to Ohio State, do they get in? I don't know at that point either. I just don't know what they could have done in their own conference to get past. Everyone thinks that's a lower conference, and they're not going to be able to get over that hump.
I think you can get over that hump. I mean, they obviously were able to do it last year with bouncing around. I mean, I just think what you have to do is you have to win out. It can't be what you see this year from the Big 12 is one of those slobber knockers where everyone's knocking each other out, so you don't have a true representation. Like with the SEC, clearly Alabama's the top team. In the ACC this year, clearly Clemson was that top dog in the conference that you can say, yes, this is going to be our representative. Who does that? I mean, you could equally say, look at Oklahoma. Even though Oklahoma beat Oklahoma State, you could make an argument for Oklahoma State. You can make an argument for West Virginia, who played tough against Baylor the other day. I mean, there's a couple of different teams, and when you're evenly matched like that, I think the committees are going to tip their hand to some of these other bigger Power 5 conferences.
Well, I think that's where the Big 12 is going to start to feel the hurt, because I think they're the only one. I looked last night and talked about it on the podcast last week, but they're the only one that has one BCS bowl, the one that gets the big money. I think they still refer to them as BCS bowls, and that's Oklahoma. Everyone else gets slotted back. Compare that with the Big 10. They have 4 teams bringing in that big money, playoffs and BCS type bowls. I just don't think they're going to be able to compete in the long run once that TV deal money starts to get spread out.
Well, and I think, this also goes hand in hand with when you're looking at the seeding and you're looking at who deserves to be playing. It's who's playing the best right now. Who are those teams that you wouldn't want to face right now because they're picking up a head of steam. That's why for a lot of reasons I'm okay with Florida State jumping over Louisville. I mean, they're beating the teams that they should be beating. I think early in the year the injuries, especially to Derwin James, really hurt them because he's the primary guy making calls for that defense. And when you take an athlete like him out, there has to be a level of adjustment. It just so happened that they caught that adjustment right in the heart of a really tough schedule.
Yeah, I agree. And just going off that injury, is he back for the Orange Bowl, Derwin James?
I don't think he is. I know they were holding him out because there really wasn't a reason or rationale for playing him, because they knew after the UNC loss that they weren't going to be vying for one of the playoff spots. I think they pretty much saw the writing on the wall, so they were just holding him out just to make sure that whatever injury he did have going on didn't aggravate it so that he ends up missing time next year.
What year is he?
I believe this was only his sophomore year. He was seeing time as a true freshman last year.
So he has to come back. I didn't know if he was like Jabril Peppers. He's in the position right now where he could go pro after this year, even though he's only a redshirt sophomore or whatever it is.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like to see from the NCAAs, and I don't know how you would put this into play, but I think from a scouting perspective, I wish that they would have a better system in place to give the athletes a good idea of where they're going to be at. Because, I mean, there's a lot of money between a second and a fourth round draft pick that if you're a 4 and you're a Jabril Pepper, your stock happens to fall for whatever reason. Instead of going from first to second round, you fall from second to fourth, due to combines, due to the rumor mill, due to overexposure, whatever it is. That can really hurt a kid, signing an NFL contract, where if they're getting reliable information, they're saying, oh yeah, definitely go. You're a round 1, round 2 prospect. Maybe it helps keep some kids in school a little bit longer, give them a little more time to mature.
Yeah, I agree. And it especially hurts whenever you have someone who is not hearing it from the agents, but a lot with like the social media now, you see guys like they're signing with agents and you're like, that came out of left field. Who's that guy? And then they don't get drafted. And then there's no recourse. And I think they started doing that with college basketball now, where they have like a late signing period, which might be after their combine. I'm not sure how the NBA works, but it does give that extra period where the kids realize if they're going to get drafted or not, they can come back, kind of like a safe haven or a fallback for them.
Because I think that would help when you have schools that are you an athlete or two away? Like, to look at even last year, if all the indicators for Dalvin Cook were to say go, Do they try to push him out the door because that window only lasts so long that if you wait around, coming back, is there that gamble of getting hurt, hurting your stock, not having as successful of a year? I think you really need to have reliable information coming in and out because it's such a big money making deal.
Well, yeah, I look at Jabril this year, and with Harbaugh having his NFL experience, I have a feeling he's going to tell him to go, and he's slated as a top 5 pick. But some scouts, they don't know where to put him because we played him as like that hybrid linebacker position. But he definitely grades out if you watch him play to a strong safety like Troy Polamalu. That's who he reminds me of. All over the field, he can make the big hits. And if you look at him compared to that position, he's not undersized. He's like 6'2" and like 20 pounds. Like he's a big dude, but for linebacker, that's undersized, yeah. So it depends on where some teams are going to actually put him, if he's going to end up being that top 5 pick or not.
Could a team use a guy that size, potentially try to put some weight on him and move him to like maybe a 4-3 defensive end where he's in a rush position, or do you think he's better off just trying to maintain where he's at and stay secondary level or even offensively?
Well, he's good enough in coverage that I think if he excels in the NFL, if he's going to stick around for 15, 20 years, that's going to be at a strong safety position. He might get beat up there, maybe not last as long, but he does have the speed to rush off the edge, kind of like, who was the guy for the Steelers that used to do that? Was it Gideon? I can't remember. But he was similar, just a ripped dude that just rushed off the end and had all those sacks from outside linebacker. But that's in a 3-4.
Yeah, like Jason Gilden.
Yeah,
but Gilden also had a lot of the size, too.
Yeah. Well, Peppers could have that same size if he bulks up, but it's going to come back to it. Are they going to have a fit for him, or are they going to try to use him in this hybrid position? And I don't know if that's going to work in the NFL.
Well, I think that's where he might be better off sticking around the extra, even being projected out as one of those picks is when you're playing in a spot where you're unsure of what your role is, to give yourself a little bit more time maybe to get a little bit bigger. You can clearly carve out what that role is. Are you an offense guy? Are you a defense guy? That I think would help solidify where he's going to be at. Because one of the things I would hate to see is to have him go out and scouts say, oh yeah, I definitely want to use you at safety. They draft him, relatively high, and then it comes back to bite him because if he doesn't pan out right away, did he waste that opportunity, before he had a chance to really develop?
Yeah, and looking at it now, I just looked up Ryan Shazier. I think because he plays linebacker, that's sort of like the same position, and I want to say he's the same size, around the same size, 6'2", 220 pounds, 30 pounds. So I think it looks like Peppers is 6'1". So I mean, he has an opportunity, but it's going to be, is he going to be able to make an impact? And then on the other hand, if he comes back, the only thing Harbaugh could say is maybe make a playoff run. The team loses a lot, so probably not next year. The only thing he would come back for is a chance at the Heisman.
Well, and arguably, I mean, at this point, I think he probably should be your Heisman Trophy candidate. If you're basing it off of the best college football player of the season, what else are you looking for in a college player? He's an offense guy. He's a defense guy. He's returning kicks and punts. I think they're turning the Heisman into who was the best quarterback of the year, who was the best running. Like it's turned into a skill instead of who's the best player in college football.
Yeah, and I think what hurts them this year is the playoff loss. I think if they beat Ohio State, it's such a weak Heisman year that he probably would have won it. But after that loss, I mean, he had an interception. If he maybe would have took it to the house, sealed the game, maybe he would have got it. But he kind of disappeared there at the end. And I just don't think they're going to give it to him after that. He might not even get an invite now.
And that's a shame because in years past, there have been a lot of defensive guys that have made it. Even looking back, Charles Woodson was a prime example that was in that similar role that you would think they should be celebrating these guys that are two-way players when it's become such a specialized league. But
even Charles Woodson, he's closer to the Honey Badger, but the one Jabril, I think from a play perspective, he had about the same play balance as Chris Gamble. because Gamble played a lot of offense and defense. And I think from a play perspective, Woodson played mostly defense. He wasn't split as much as those other two players.
I would agree with that.
And Gamble, I don't even remember if he was even mentioned. I think Troy Smith won it that year. But just thinking back off memory, I would say Chris Gamble was a more impressive player.
Right. Well, on an Ohio State note, you were saying about the playoffs. Urban Meyer had a quote that I was reading today about how he said back around, I believe it was around 2006, that teams that don't win their conference championship shouldn't be in the college football playoff or shouldn't be competing for a national championship. I love the double standard that he sets when he talks to the media. It's always when his team's at fault, he throws rocks, but when he has the chance to make it right, he always backpedals on it.
Oh yeah, I know. He was after the Michigan when he was propping us up, saying that we were the second best team behind them and all this other stuff, just to try to help his stock out, because he knew that if Michigan was in that playoff discussion ahead of Penn State, then there was no way Ohio State was going to fall out, and that's basically what happened.
Yeah, and I also looked at with Urban Meyer. He tried to come off as this, big character, high character guy. Coming out when Jameis Winston was having his crab legs incident. He was one of the first people to say, "Oh, if he was on my team, he'd be suspended and everything else." But then when his quarterback gets a DUI, he had like a half suspension, a game suspension against a community college.
Yeah, I know. Kind of comical, but I think that's why the wheels fell off at Florida. And a lot of people say that Harbaugh is going to turn the team off on him, but Urban Meyer's been doing the same thing. But I've seen a lot of stuff where Urban is more, he plays like the coach's game. He's doing all the media. He was in the media. He doesn't get the flack because he's friends with those guys now. He took a year off to become friends with the media. So they're not going to be tough on him.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he plays a lot nicer than Harbaugh. Harbaugh, you got to love the fact that he says what's on his mind, love him, hate him. But that also comes back to bite him when, after the Ohio State game, he makes the comments that he makes and kind of leaves things up in the air. He doesn't talk to he's been on this media hiatus now for.
Well, I think he came back just this weekend and said something about he's not letting the refs go until they start calling fair games. So he's going to stay in the spotlight. And actually, it's interesting with ESPN losing all their subscribers and people going to Fox Sports. Fox Sports are all over him. Like, they love Harbaugh. So you turn on one channel, everyone hates him. You turn on the other, everyone loves him.
Well, and I think ESPN's kind of shooting themselves in the foot, even with their coverage of the whole LSU coaching change. You had during the middle of the LSU, I believe it was one of the recent LSU games, announcing that Herman was going to be expected to sign with them on Saturday, and it just completely muddied the water.
Oh, did you see that? I talked about it before, maybe I tweeted about it, but they shoved the camera right in Herman's face, like a low up angle. He was so caught off guard, and they're like, "Are you taking the job?" And he was like, "What job?" And he was so caught off guard, and you knew at that moment that, like, he was not taking the LSU job, and ESPN was pushing this agenda, and I think I texted you at the time saying, ESPN's got this wrong. He had no idea. And I knew his sights were on Texas. I think he was a Texas guy. So,
well, I think ESPN was right in reporting he was leaving, but I think they just jumped the gun because with all the money that LSU, I don't know what they were offering. I'm sure it was close to Texas money, but had they have not just let the process run itself and let them announce it, it's like they wanted to be the first to cross the finish line that they just started throwing spaghetti off the wall to see what would stick.
Yep.
It was Jimbo Fisher, and then it was like eventually we're gonna get it right. We just got to keep throwing names.
Yeah, I agree, and they've done that before in the past. Since we don't know if this is recording or not, let's wrap it up. Orange Bowl, what's your prediction? Florida State and Michigan right now.
I love the Noles in it.
What do you think the score is going to be?
Oh, I think it's going to end up being a high-scoring game because Jimbo Fisher's a hell of a play caller, and our defensive coordinator is horrendous and can't cover anyone. So I'm thinking probably 35-28 Noles.
Well, if you watch the Iowa game, the key to beating Michigan is to just keep running the clock out. So I'm expecting a low-scoring game. Maybe not the 6-3 score that I texted you earlier, but I'm thinking all field goals, maybe 9-6, and it could go either way at this point because our field goal kicker, he misses some. But if he's on, I could see Michigan taking that game. And then that's a last hurrah because I think most of the team's gone. So we'll have to see what happens.
Sounds good.